Robin gently applied the brakes. A sharp turn lay ahead, right before a bridge. Given the potential danger, she decided to slow down. Robin wasn't an experienced driver and preferred not to risk unnecessary dangers. Moreover, she was getting married in a month. It was her fiancé who had gifted her this car, not a brand new one, but a used one in good condition. "Of course I don't mind an old car, and I'm deeply grateful for it," she said when he showed it to her. "But why? If money is a problem, I can manage without a car for now." "It's not about the money," Josh replied softly. "I don't see the point in buying a new car when a slightly used one, still in good condition, can be bought for much less. Plus, you just got your license. If anything happens, you won't feel as bad about damaging this car as you would a new one." "Are you implying I didn't study hard enough?" Robin feigned insult. "No, not at all," Josh laughed. "I remember what it was like to be a beginner myself. Once you're a bit more comfortable, we can consider a newer car." "Yes, I suppose you're right," Robin agreed. Yes, Josh's arguments were rational, and his frugal lifestyle, rooted in a philosophy of prudent economy, was one of the reasons she had chosen him over other suitors. While Josh assured her there was no financial issues, she knew the truth was more nuanced. He had money, but it wasn't prudent to spend it on lavish purchases, especially now. For years, Josh had been developing his own business, which demanded substantial investment, including financial. Of course, in some ways it was easier for him than others. He got the money to open his business from his parents, who were successful businessmen. In addition, they were able to give him some valuable advice. But that was the end of their participation in the business of their favourite son. From childhood, he was taught to be independent. Robin came from a modest, but not impoverished family. Her parents were middle managers who earned a decent income and had no ambitions for starting their own business. Robin followed their path, working at several firms and making some career progress before meeting Josh. During their relationship, Josh offered her a position in his company, not just any position, but as his partner. "Absolutely not," she declined firmly. "I lack the experience for such an important role." "I don't have a lot either," Josh countered. "I'm learning as I go." "But you have some knowledge from your parents and experience in running your own business. I'm just not ready for that." "Okay, how about this? You join me at the same level you're at now, and we'll enhance your skills and knowledge until you're ready to be a full partner. If something happens to me, who better to run the business than my wife?" "Oh, don't say that! Nothing bad is going to happen to you," Robin, who was somewhat superstitious, retorted. And now Robin was heading home from work. Her fiancé, as usual, remained at the office with more work on his plate. This was the primary reason why Robin had obtained her driver's license and needed a car. Without it, commuting from the city office to their country cottage wasn't very convenient. Suddenly, Robin sensed something amiss. She needed to make a right turn, but despite her best efforts, the car continued moving straight. The bridge's railing, which seemed too weak, was already in sight. It was evident that the railing wouldn't hold up against the weight of the car, even at a slow speed. Overwhelmed with panic, Robin couldn't comprehend what was happening. In desperation, she pressed the brake pedal to the floor. But it was too late. The car had rammed into the railing and plunged into the river, sinking slowly as if in slow motion. Overwhelmed by the impact, stress, or a combination of both, she lost consciousness. A traffic jam began to form on the shore as onlookers stopped and exited their vehicles. A crowd gradually gathered on the bridge, watching the unfolding tragedy with a sense of helplessness. Everyone wanted to help, but no one knew how. "Shouldn't we call an ambulance?" someone suggested. "What's the use of an ambulance? We need emergency services," someone else retorted. "The paramedics aren't going to dive into icy water, are they? By the time they arrive, she'll have drowned." "Why doesn't someone call for help? For God's sake! If you're so smart, why don't you call?" Someone called either the rescuers or the doctors, but it was painfully clear they wouldn't arrive in time. A bright red car was sinking deeper into the water, carrying the woman behind the wheel with it. Time was running out. No one in the crowd knew where the man in dirty, ragged clothes had come from. He hadn't arrived in a car. Before anyone could react, he discarded his old jacket and without hesitation plunged into the cold water. By the time this mysterious stranger reached the car, it was completely submerged in the turbulent river. Then he dived in. The crowd seemed to hold its breath along with the brave man. Noise ceased instantly, and an eerie silence enveloped the scene. A minute passed, a second, a third, and finally the brave man's head appeared above the water. Making powerful strokes with his arms, he was clearly dragging something heavy behind him. The crowd's tension, which had momentarily subsided, surged with renewed intensity. Uncertainty hung in the air as it was unclear whether the woman was still alive or if the man had merely eased the rescue service's work by retrieving her body. Ignoring the spectators, the hero reached the shore and gently placed the woman on the ground. He immediately began resuscitation efforts. After a few tense seconds, Robin coughed, spat out water, and opened her eyes. She could only stare at her saviour in stunned gratitude, wordlessly expressing her thanks. When the ambulance finally arrived, the crowd that had gathered near the bridge erupted in applause and jubilant shouts. Amidst the chaos, the mysterious man who had helped out vanished without anyone noticing, and leaving behind him his shabby jacket. Robin was rushed to the hospital. A few hours later, her fiancé arrived. The doctors informed him about the incident. He blamed himself for the accident, knowing that the car's malfunction, which he had overlooked when buying, was likely the cause. And all due to my foolish desire to save money, he thought, guilt-ridden. I should have bought a new car with a warranty for my beloved, or at the very least, I should not have skimped on a proper diagnosis. Instead, I believed the previous owner, who claimed the car had been recently serviced and was trouble-free. Upon seeing Robin, Josh exclaimed, "Honey, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine now," she replied soothingly. "The doctors say it's a miracle I didn't sustain any serious injuries from the fall. It could have ended much worse if not for the help of a kind stranger." "Who was he?" Josh inquired. "Did he leave some contacts? We should thank him." "I don't know. He looked like a vagrant. He didn't leave anything. In fact, he left so quickly that he even forgot his things. Poor guy." "Then all the more reason to find him," said Josh confidently. "If he's a vagrant, he must need help himself." Knowing her fiancé's stubbornness, Robin did not argue with him. From her perspective, it was not worth disturbing the man who had made it clear he did not want attention. However, changing Josh's mind was impossible. He began to search for the unknown vagrant with enthusiasm. He even went to that ill-fated bridge and searched the nearby area. Furthermore, he used all his connections, which finally led to a result. It turned out that CCTV cameras near the scene had recorded the incident, and Josh managed to get the footage. As it turned out, the stranger often walked on the bridge, usually accompanied by a large, shaggy dog. The man's face was clearly visible in some shots, and he always approached from the same side. This information was enough for the determined Josh. Armed with printouts of frames from the camera, he revisited the bridge and tried to retrace the man's known route. When he lost the trail, he asked passers-by for help. Many recognized the man with the large and reportedly friendly dog, but no one could pinpoint where he lived. Undeterred, Josh returned to the area repeatedly, questioning passers-by. He always carried a small bag with him, containing a new jacket he'd bought for the man. He felt this was particularly important with winter approaching. However, no one could tell him where the man lived. After 3 weeks of fruitless searching, Josh's enthusiasm was not dampened. Instead, his failures only spurred him on, fueling his desire to continue his search with increased fervour. All the while, his own wedding was fast approaching. Finally, his efforts were rewarded. One day, upon arrival at his destination, he was surprised to find a large, shaggy black dog, the very same one he had seen in video recordings. Despite the similarity of all the other dogs, he could recognize this particular one from a mile away. Beside the dog stood its owner, a man about Josh's age but alarmingly thin. This impression was emphasized by his clothing. He wore only a light windbreaker, despite the months not being particularly warm. As Josh approached the stranger, he contemplated how to initiate the conversation. He still believed that his search was due to good fortune rather than his own efforts. However, he was mistaken. The stranger spoke first, and his tone was far from friendly. "I take it you're the one who's been snooping around here for weeks, asking about me and showing people pictures of me." "Yes, that's me," Josh responded. He was so startled by the confrontation that his planned responses flew right out of his head. He was unsure how to react to such a frosty welcome, and certainly didn't anticipate the tramp's hostility. "And why, may I ask, do you need me?" "Well, you see," Josh began, regaining his composure, "you've rescued my fiancée. You remember, right, the woman who fell off the bridge in her car? You pulled her out and administered first aid." "Yeah, well, it's difficult to forget such an experience." The stranger's tone softened a bit. "Let's go and talk in my hut if you'd like. The atmosphere might not seem too cozy, but that's the way it is." Josh noticed the tramp seemed eager to leave the crowded place as quickly as possible. This behaviour matched what he had observed on the cameras. The man avoided large crowds, preferring to walk his dog when the streets were empty. As Josh considered the implications of this secrecy, the man and his dog led him through some dark back alleys. It didn't take them long to navigate. In about 10 minutes they arrived at an apparently abandoned house on the outskirts, which was their destination. "Are you hiding from someone?" Josh couldn't contain his curiosity. "What makes you say that?" his companion replied sharply. "No, I'm just—" Josh hesitated, then quickly changed the subject. "What's your name, anyway?" "Barney." "My name is Josh. Nice to meet you. I didn't mean to offend you by bringing you here, but you left your jacket on the bridge. It seemed to me that you may not be able to afford to lose it," he said, handing Barney a package with his jacket. Barney accepted the jacket calmly, saying simply, "Thank you." The two men sat in silence for a moment. Josh surveyed the desolate house, as vacant and neglected on the inside as it appeared from the outside. The only sign of life was a pile of rags in the corner, a makeshift bed for a dog. "You shouldn't live like this," Josh murmured. "I understand that things must be difficult for you. Maybe I can help you." Barney shook his head. The conversation had reached a dead end. Barney was clearly not open to speak, and Josh was at a loss for how to proceed. The awkward silence was broken only by the sound of the dog chewing something in the corner, oblivious to the human tension. "At least come to our wedding, okay?" Josh tried again. "It's in a few days. Don't worry about attire or transportation. I'll take care of everything. Please come. I think Robin would be pleased." "Yeah? But who will I leave the dog with?" Barney muttered. "Well, if it's a real issue, there are solutions. Pet hotels exist, or I've heard that individuals can temporarily care for pets. But honestly, I don't think leaving him alone for a few hours is a problem. After all, he wasn't with you when you rescued Robin." The discussion continued for a while. Barney made up the most ridiculous excuses not to go to the wedding. Josh, in return, was entering the very state of excitement that did not let him stop looking for the mysterious stranger. He was ready to argue late into the night to convince Barney. Eventually, sensing this, Barney relented. "All right," he conceded. "I'll attend, but not for long." Josh worried that Barney said this purely to pacify him. He feared that on the big day Barney would simply not appear at the restaurant, return all his gifts, apologise, and claim something absurd like his dog being ill. Josh was so uncertain about Barney's attendance that he didn't even inform Robin. He reasoned that if Barney did show up, it would be a pleasant surprise. If not, the bride wouldn't be disappointed on her wedding day because she hadn't been given false hope. However, despite the circumstances, Barney arrived, but he stayed away from the general festivities, talked to no one, and answered all questions briefly. But he did show up. It seemed his word was unbreakable, which made Josh respect the peculiar wanderer even more. And everything seemed to be going well, except that he noticed that the bride, who had been cheerful and satisfied with her life since the morning, had fallen into some kind of gloom, or into some kind of thoughtfulness. No, of course she was smiling, chatting amiably with the guests and all that, but Josh knew his beloved too well to realise something was going wrong. "Honey, are you all right?" he quietly asked when he got the chance. "Why did you bring Barney here?" she responded directly. Caught off guard, Josh stammered. He probably expected any response but this one. "I thought you'd be happy to see him," he replied, dumbfounded. "Of course I'm glad, but that's the issue. He's not pleased to be here at all. I can't figure out why. Actually, I might have an idea. He's just a wanderer with no home, surrounded by wealth and success. How do you think it makes him feel? He's been pulled from his familiar world, plunged into all this luxury, to entertain the fiancée of a rich businessman, and then he'll be shoved back into his miserable life." "I don't think that's the situation," Josh responded seriously. "I offered him various kinds of help, but he declined. He refused to work for me or accept money. It's as if he prefers his miserable life. But you're correct about one thing. He clearly didn't want to come here. Perhaps I shouldn't have persuaded him so much. I don't understand why I was so determined." "But I know why," Robin laughed, but she failed to continue her thought, if indeed she was going to do so. The toastmaster, who had been providing some background entertainment without really capturing the guests' attention, finally started some silly contests and other activities, demanding the audience's compulsory participation. "And you, young man, what are you doing standing idle?" he suddenly asked, clearly addressing Barney. Barney had thought his duty was done. He had kept his promise and planned to leave quietly, without drawing attention, but now all eyes were on him. The toastmaster continued, "It's come to my attention that this wedding wouldn't have happened without this young man. Just imagine, if the bride had drowned, we'd all be here, but not celebrating, but mourning." "Where did you find him?" Robin snapped at her new husband. "Are you trying to save money again?" "No, actually," Josh replied, taken aback. "Actually, my acquaintances recommended him to me. I guess there was something I didn't know about the specificity of their humour." "Well, young man," the toastmaster continued, "don't be shy. Come forward and congratulate our newlyweds." Barney slowly climbed onto the stage as if battling a physical barrier. He fumbled with the microphone, seemingly unfamiliar with it. He began with a few clichés, then surprisingly presented the newlyweds with a heartfelt song. The lyrics spoke of boundless love, and his beautiful sensual vocals were a pleasant surprise. He was met with thunderous applause upon finishing, which seemed to embarrass him. As if snapping back to reality, he quickly handed the microphone back to the toastmaster, exited the stage, and soon left the celebration. Intrigued by Barney's strange behaviour, Josh nevertheless respected his privacy and didn't make any attempts to contact the strange man. And to his great joy, his patience paid off in an unexpected way. Within a week, the answers to his questions found him, albeit not in the way he had anticipated. Josh had just finished his work for the day and was about to leave when his cell phone rang. To his surprise, the caller was an old acquaintance, an investigator on high-profile cases with whom he hadn't spoken in years. Negative thoughts began to emerge. "Hello, Neil. It's been an age since we last spoke. Is this just a casual call, or is it about work?" Josh asked. "Well, we haven't spoken in a while, but not long enough for you to forget that I don't just call for fun," the stern voice replied. With a heavy sigh, Josh asked, "All right, how can I assist? Or am I under suspicion? Although if that were the case, you wouldn't have called. You would have shown up in person, right?" "Correct. This is about your recent wedding, or more specifically, one of your guests." A pang of fear struck Josh's heart. He had no doubt which guest he was talking about. Thoughts began racing through his mind, ranging from regret for inviting this stranger to the wedding to a firm belief that Barney wasn't involved in anything criminal. After all, Barney didn't strike him as a criminal, let alone one who would be of interest to investigators of serious crimes. A video of a young man singing a heartfelt love song has gone viral, Josh's companion continued. "It's incredibly popular, and deservedly so. Even I enjoyed it. But that's beside the point. We're interested in the singer." "What is your interest in the singer?" "I shouldn't disclose that, but taking into account our old friendship, I'll reveal some details. This man is a suspect in an old, serious case. It might not be him, but I'm confident in my intuition. It was a high-profile case. Perhaps you've heard of it. There was a helicopter transporting gold from northern mines. Your guest worked there as a pilot. Reliable for a long time, no issues. Except during one flight, something went terribly wrong. There was a catastrophic accident. The helicopter was damaged, and everyone on board died. Well, almost everyone. 3 bodies were found, but the crew was 4. All were identified except the pilot, and the gold was missing. A substantial amount of gold." "And you think it was the pilot who killed everyone and hid himself with the gold, right?" Josh asked for some reason. "Well, I can't think of any other possibilities. I actually wanted to ask you this. How would we find him, to communicate, so to speak? I know he must be a friend of yours, but you know me, if he's innocent, he has nothing to fear. Or maybe it's not even the same person at all. It'll be easy to find out nowadays." Well. You'll promise anything to get the information you need," Josh thought irritably, and then said aloud, "Unfortunately, I can't help you with that. He's not a friend of mine. I have no contact with him. I have no idea where he lives." "And how, in that case, did he happen to be at your wedding?" the investigator asked ingratiatingly. "It was pure chance. You see, just a month before the wedding, he saved my wife." "Really? She was in an accident. Her car fell into the river and he pulled her out and resuscitated her. We invited him over as a thank you, so he came." "I see," said Neil. "Well, let's check it out. And you, if you find out anything, then—" "Of course, I'll call," Josh answered briefly before hanging up the phone. He paced around the office, unsure of his next move. Something didn't add up. Barney had made a positive impression on him, not only because he had saved Robin, which was important, of course. But would a hardened criminal save a stranger by jumping into cold water, risking discovery in the process? No. He would have passed by quietly, avoiding any adverse consequences. Besides, why would Barney live as a vagabond if he had stolen a large amount of valuable gold? With that much wealth, he could start a completely new life, make documents, travel abroad, and live in luxury without denying himself anything. Yet he lives in a dilapidated, abandoned house with a dog. Speaking of the dog, they say dogs resemble their owners. Despite its ferocity, this dog was a calm and harmless creature, There were also arguments supporting the alternate option, specifically Barney's peculiar behaviour. He seemed to be evading someone or something. Could it be the police? Moreover, who's to say the police are always correct, never pursuing the innocent? Ultimately, Josh concluded that the best course of action was to confront Barney and inquire directly. He would seek answers and subsequently decide the next step. Despite being warned that Barney might be a ruthless killer, Josh didn't perceive any threat. Perhaps he was reluctant to believe it. However, upon nearing the house, Josh realized that he was too late. A large black dog, evidently distraught, was in front of the rundown building. Barney was nowhere in sight. It seemed the police had beaten him to it. They certainly had more resources for the search than he initially did when looking for the peculiar stranger. Josh approached the dog and spoke affectionate words that held no meaning. The dog peered at him from under its brow, growled menacingly, but after a sniff, clearly recognized him. With melancholic eyes, the dog walked up to Josh and sat at his feet, accepting a pat on the scruff of its neck. "Don't worry," Josh reassured. "We'll rescue your master." Then the man opened the car door, gesturing invitingly. The dog looked at him with disbelief, but eventually hopped into the cabin. On the drive, Josh dialed his wife's number, contemplating how best to explain the situation, but no suitable explanation came to mind. By the way, Josh indeed was only half an hour late. By the time he received a call from Neil, the police already had a rough idea of where to search for the suspect. It wasn't hard for them to scour the area and locate an abandoned house. Barney surrendered without resistance, only requesting to find someone to care for his dog. Unfortunately, even that wish was denied. At the police station, Barney was taken in for questioning. The stern investigator seemed to be against him from the start. Barney was familiar with this type of person. They weren't interested in uncovering the truth. The investigator already had a preconceived notion of what had transpired, and any contradicting facts were disregarded. "Barney Petrov, correct?" the investigator asked sternly. "Yes, that's me," Barney grudgingly admitted. Was there any point in denying it? Claiming it was a case of mistaken identity wouldn't work. A DNA test would quickly prove that he was the pilot who vanished after the helicopter crash, only making his situation worse. "Do you understand why we've called you here?" "I wouldn't exactly say I was invited," Barney retorted. "But yes, I understand why I'm of interest. You believe I'm responsible for the deaths of 3 people, a crashed helicopter, and a significant amount of missing gold. Correct?" "See? It's not difficult at all," the investigator suddenly smiled, envisioning another commendation on his uniform. "What's not difficult?" "To confess to the crimes you've committed is admirable. Your cooperation with the investigation will be taken into account." "Wait a minute," Barney objected. "I didn't confess to anything. I merely stated the charges you could bring against me at your request, but I didn't admit to actually doing it." "That's interesting. So, how do you explain what happened?" "I was set up. There was no gold in the helicopter. We were transporting some kind of waste under the pretense of it being gold. I discovered this after the crash when the bags burst open. The helicopter was damaged just before the flight. They probably hoped someone would survive to take the blame, or maybe some escaped convicts if they all died. It's a tough place up north, with plenty of criminals." "That sounds very plausible," the investigator snorted, not hiding his skepticism. "But if you're innocent, why have you been hiding all this time? Why didn't you go to the police immediately and tell them everything as it happened?" "Well, I have to say, the crash didn't go without a trace for me. I was severely injured and lost my memory. Locals found me and took me to the hospital where I stayed for a few months. I left with no money, no ID, and no knowledge of who I was or where I came from. I had no recollection
of who might need me. I ended up homeless and roamed the streets for a long time, switched cities, and then a dog found me. Interestingly, that's when my memory started to return. I'm not sure what the connection is. Perhaps there's none, but 2 years later I finally regained my memory. But who would I turn to? Who would believe me? Even now you don't believe me. I didn't want to end up in jail, and I had grown accustomed to the nomadic lifestyle. I would have carried on living peacefully, not bothering anyone, if it weren't for that damn wedding.
Unsurprisingly, the investigator did not believe Barney, and the man was sent to a detention centre to await trial, the result of which seemed inevitable. Barney seemed resigned to his fate and was more concerned about his dog. Neil had just finished an interrogation and was about to call Josh, but Josh beat him to it. As soon as Neil turned on his phone, which he always kept off during work, it was inundated with messages about numerous attempts to reach him, followed by another call.
"Hello again," the investigator responded. "Are you concerned about your friend, whose whereabouts you claim not to know?" That was intentionally misleading the investigation. What were you thinking? I saw on the camera how you were searching for him, and how you had finally met up with him.
"Listen, Neil, I don't believe that Barney could have killed anyone," Josh stated bluntly.
You don't need to believe it. The facts are all lined up, and there's no concrete evidence of his innocence. His explanation is absurd.
"Do you have any proof of his guilt?" Josh asked.
Think about it, Neil. Would a murderer risk his life to save a stranger?
"People change," the investigator replied philosophically,
"but that doesn't absolve them of responsibility for past crimes." Well, then what about the gold? Neil, he must have had a lot of money, right? If he really did what you suspect him of, why is he living like a bum in some abandoned hovel?
"Who knows? Maybe he stole it,
but didn't know what to do with it. He was just an ordinary working man, not familiar with jewellery. So he got overwhelmed by the money he was close to. It happens. And he got nothing but trouble out of it. And yet—"
"Josh," interrupted Neil,
"I'll give you some advice. Instead of trying to persuade me, you'd better talk to your friend. Convince him that cooperating with the investigation is his best option. Make him tell us the truth. Make him repent and show us where he hid the gold. He must have it somewhere. He'll get credit. He'll get the minimum sentence. And then he'll be out on parole for good behaviour. That's the best option I can offer you."
"I'll think about it,"
Josh said dryly, and hung up the phone without saying goodbye. He was seething with rage. Now he was absolutely convinced of Barney's innocence. The poor man was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. What evidence did they have against him? Didn't their country uphold the presumption of innocence? Ignoring Neil's advice, Josh hired the best lawyer he could find for Barney. The cost was substantial, but the man felt responsible for the unfortunate individual. After all, it was Josh's wedding where he was discovered. The lawyer was competent and well-versed in the case. During the trial he convincingly argued that without evidence, witnesses, or surveillance footage from the scene, there was no reason to believe one version over the other. The prosecution's story also had many unresolvable issues. For instance, how could Barney have single-handedly stolen and hidden such a large amount of gold? And Barney's good reputation with his superiors, he was responsible, hard-working and reliable, also worked in his favour. Despite some difficulty, Barney was acquitted. He left the courtroom a free man with no legal issues. However, he still had no home, job or property, and he had no idea how to start his new life.
"I need to find my dog first,"
he said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. "No need," Josh responded. "We have him. I picked him up right after they took you away. I thought it'd be trouble, but he's a good dog. He's obedient, doesn't jump, and doesn't make a mess in the house."
"Of course,"
Barney smiled. "I didn't just pick him up. I raised him as best I could." And it worked out great. But think, where will you take him? Are you going to wander the streets again? Or go back to your shack? It could collapse on you. Don't do it. So, what else can I do? There is something. Come work for me. I can't pay much yet, but it's enough to live on. Plus I'll rent you an apartment as my employee. It's a good arrangement. We'll find a place that allows dogs. It's kind of embarrassing. You've already helped me so much. Barney hesitated. I've only got you out of the mess I put you in, Josh objected. And I still haven't thanked you for saving Robin. Believe me, her life means a lot to me. I don't really have any skills. Barney continued to hesitate. Except for flying a helicopter, and not very well at that. Skills diminish, machines improve. It's a constant need for retraining, and you probably don't need a pilot, do you? I don't need a pilot, but a driver could be useful. It's not in my rank to drive myself anymore. Can you drive a car? I can, but I need to renew my license. Well, that's not a problem. And so the deal was sealed. As promised by Josh, Barney and his dog moved into a spacious apartment near the office. Barney's life began to improve, and he barely recalled his past. There was only one regret. Once, a long time ago, he had a fiancée, Grace. Where she was now or who she was with, he didn't know. He was certain she had abandoned him after the helicopter crash. But he didn't blame her. She must have had her own life, and her feelings for him had faded. Barney's duty involved driving Josh around, primarily to various business negotiations. Usually he waited in the car, but occasionally he was offered to sit in the lobby of the offices or restaurants. The man typically declined, feeling out of place in posh interiors, expensive offices, or fancy restaurants. One day, Barney took Josh to the office to meet with prospective investors. He hadn't even had breakfast that morning, so he accepted the offer to wait for his boss in the office and have a cup of tea. The negotiations had been going on for over an hour when suddenly a woman came out of the meeting room. Barney also noticed another man involved in the negotiations from the corner of his eye and was taken aback. Despite the passing of time, he couldn't fail to recognize these people, especially the woman. He knew every feature of her face better than his own, as she was once his bride in his past life. Yes, it was his beloved Grace. And her companion was Craig, his superior, who had sent him on that doomed journey. As Barney now vividly recalled, he wasn't the intended person to make that flight. However, Craig had insisted, stating that the task was too important to entrust to just anyone. A gullible Barney had no idea that in fact, either death or years in prison lay ahead of him. But for both swindlers, either option would have been a good fit. Barney was now sure about who had set him up with the transportation and who had taken all the gold that was falsely implicated on him. Besides, he saw that this couple cooed sweetly and exchanged some tenderness. They were clearly in a romantic relationship. Everything clicked into place. They were the ones responsible for his troubles. And then he literally burst into the room, and without realizing his own actions, with fists attacked the former boss, shouting accusations and insults. It took considerable effort for Josh to pull Barney away from the potential partner. "Is this how you negotiate now?" the victim asked sternly. "We didn't agree on everything, certainly, but not to this extent." "I apologize for this terrible incident," Josh started. "Boss, you shouldn't have any dealings with them," Barney interrupted. "They're crooks and murderers. Trust me." "Calm down," Josh shouted at him, "and leave the office. We'll deal with this later." Reluctantly, Barney obeyed. Once back in the car, he tried to still the tremors in his hands and wipe away the tears that had welled up in his eyes. Josh returned 10 minutes later to put it mildly, in a bad mood. "The negotiations are ruined," he nearly shouted. "I had high hopes for these people. Very respectable people, by the way. They could be investors in my project. I hope I convinced them to reconsider, but there are no guarantees. What on earth happened to you? Nervously and with a stutter that occasionally broke into near hysterical sobs, Barney tried to explain what had transpired. Josh listened to him without interruption, but Barney had the impression that his words weren't entirely believed. I've spent so much time with this woman, wouldn't I recognize her? And my ex-boss hasn't changed much. Well, let's say, Josh said slowly, but are you sure it was them who set you up? Who else could it be? It's obvious. Obvious? You know, the investigator I know used to say that about a man whom the court later found completely innocent. Doesn't that remind you of anything? That's not the same thing at all. Barney was taken aback. Sounds exactly the same to me, replied Josh. The same kind of accusations based on a person's prejudices? Don't know what happened to that helicopter for sure. And yes, maybe she wasn't cheating on you then. Maybe she married Craig more recently. Anyway, but it's none of your business or mine. It's all in the past. And you shouldn't accuse people unless you have 100% proof. But, no buts. This conversation is over, Josh interrupted. If you ever pull such a prank again, I regret to inform you, but I'll have to let you go. Friendship aside, I won't allow anyone to jeopardize my business. For a while, it seemed as if they had chosen to forget the confrontation. Barney continued to drive Josh to meetings as usual, but he never saw his ex-fiancée and her husband again. He even nurtured a hope that Josh had heeded his advice and was seeking more dependable partners. However, he was soon to discover how wrong he was. One Monday morning, when he went to pick up Josh for his work as usual, he found only Robin at home. To say she was upset would be an understatement. She was near panic. He left for a meeting out of town Friday night, she said. What do you mean, a meeting? Barney was taken aback. He let me off early on Friday. Who drove him? He went himself. He said he didn't want you there. My God, whispered Barney, beginning to understand. Was he negotiating with Craig Harris? With him, Robin replied, looking at him hopefully. I've already contacted him. He said everything went well, and Josh went home the same day. He never saw him again. For the next few days, Barney literally lived with the dog at Robin's house and supported her as best he could, grappling with the daunting wish of revealing a terrible truth he was almost certain of. The likelihood of them ever seeing Josh alive again was slim. His suspicion was further confirmed when he learned that Josh's company had somehow ended up under the Harrises' control. Allegedly, Josh had signed a power of attorney for him, and while he was missing, Craig was to run the business as a primary investor. The only thing Barney couldn't do was prove his suspicions. But soon he faced one more significant problem. The secretary who worked in the Harrises' office gave testimony that Barney could be responsible for his boss's disappearance. She speculated that if he could suddenly lash out at others, he might also have killed his boss, and then an old accusation resurfaced. Although the court acquitted him, suspicion lingered, and the police were eager to close the case quickly. Robin's help with the lawyer and Barney's good relationships with neighbours, whom he always assisted, saved the man. Several people aware of his predicament provided testimony. Many had seen him walking his dog on the previous Friday night, leading to the dismissal of the charges. The police have not yet taken any more action, citing the fact that Josh could have simply gone to his mistress or some friends, or just to get away to relax from home. Upon his release from the police station, Barney was surprised to see that Robin had managed to pull herself together, and he finally had the opportunity to share his account of events so they could plan their next steps together. She believed him unconditionally, but she had no idea how to prove it. She also needed to protect her husband's business to ensure their livelihood, especially since Robin was now responsible not only for herself. Not long before Josh's disappearance, the couple had learned that they were expecting a child. Finally, Barney and Robin divided the duties. Robin, with the assistance of Josh's parents, began to sue Craig for the business. In the meantime, Barney searched for the missing boss. He travelled all possible routes in the area where the negotiations had taken place, interviewing people and reviewing camera footage that some concerned roadside business owners agreed to show him. After about a month, they had a breakthrough. The camera at one of the cafes had captured the car they were looking for. Now the direction of the search was clearer. Barney meticulously searched within several kilometres of this location, and finally he succeeded. He discovered a remote pond on the outskirts of a forest. The area was picturesque and could attract tourists, if it weren't so far from even the most remote villages and cottage communities. Presumably, this is why the criminals chose this spot. Instead of crowds of vacationers, Josh's half-submerged car was sadly bobbing on the water's surface. Barney had dived into the icy pond before, and once again he didn't hesitate to do so. The car was empty, but miraculously the video recorder was unscathed. He made it to shore, clutching the valuable gadget. He wasn't sure if the video would be saved or if there would be anything useful to the investigation, but it was worth a try. The submerged car was a significant clue. Surely it would prompt the police to investigate its owner's whereabouts. With these thoughts, Barney called the police. As he waited for their arrival, he decided to view the footage. It was a difficult task, but his feelings were bitter after watching it. He now had undeniable evidence of the Harrises' guilt. Barney's former boss was the last person to drive this car. Grace was sitting near, and the tied-up Josh was in the back seat. The horrifying recording was cut short just before the car, along with its helpless owner, was driven into the pond. On the one hand, Barney was satisfied that the criminals would finally be punished, but the price was too high, and Josh would never come back. With a heavy heart, Barney handed the recorder over to the police and went to see Robin. Once the authorities had all the evidence they needed, Craig and Grace were arrested, convicted, and sentenced to a long prison term. It wasn't just because of Josh's death. During that one-way trip, the criminal couple had told Josh in colour how they had planned the robbery and framed Barney. Time went on. Barney continued to support Robin and take care of her and then of her newborn son. However, over time their friendship, strengthened by shared adversity, blossomed into love. By the time Robin's son started school, they got married. The past troubles and sorrows hadn't vanished, but they had faded into distant memories. The family had its own traditions. For instance, every Sunday they visited the park with their son and their energetic, elderly dog. During one of these outings they noticed a beggar asking for alms, and before they knew it, two things happened at once. Firstly, their compassionate son approached the poor man to offer him his bun. Secondly, their dog, usually indifferent to strangers, approached the man wagging its tail and attempted to lick his face. That's when Barney managed to get a better look at him. "Josh!" he exclaimed in surprise, causing Robin to be taken aback. "Do you know me?" asked the beggar, hopefully petting the dog. "Forgive me for asking. I once woke up on the shore of a distant pond, with no memories of what happened before." Barney couldn't find the strength to respond. Tears welled in his eyes. He rushed towards his old friend, embracing him. "It's all right," he reassured. "We'll help you remember. It's wonderful that you're alive." Now it was Barney's turn to support Josh in every possible way. Gradually, in familiar surroundings, Josh's memory started to return. Then, they all faced an unexpected problem. Josh, having just regained his identity, discovered that his wife was now with another man, who was raising his son. Naturally, this was a devastating blow. For some time, he misbehaved. He drank, visited Robin's and Barney's house and caused scenes. But the couple did not retaliate or condemn him. Instead, they continued to support him. Then a few months later, Josh unexpectedly showed up at their doorstep, completely sober and looking guilty. "Friends, I'm sorry," he said. "I've been away for almost 7 years. You had to live your own lives here, and I shouldn't have reacted so strongly." "It's okay," Barney replied. "You're back with us now. You've always been impulsive, so it's not surprising. We've been waiting for you to come to your senses. There's just one important question." "What's that?" Josh asked. "Business," Barney answered briefly. "We've made a lot of progress over the years, but at least a third of everything we have belongs to you." Josh dismissed the idea. "Forget about this idea. I don't want it. I'll find a quiet job somewhere. I've had enough of entrepreneurship for a lifetime. It's a risky business." In the end, they agreed that Barney would send Josh a certain amount every month to repay his part of the business. This arrangement satisfied everyone. Tired of the city's hustle and bustle, Josh decided to move to the countryside. He found a suitable village with a house for sale. However, when he arrived to inspect it, the house's condition seemed very depressing. A woman in a wheelchair watched him from the neighbouring house for a while before approaching to start a conversation. "Don't get too excited about this house," she warned. "It looks bad on the outside, but believe me, it's even worse on the inside. Without a trained eye, you wouldn't know how bad it is. That's why it's so cheap." "What a pity," Josh responded. "I liked your village. I wanted to settle here, but it seems there are no other houses for sale." "Well," she said, "the morning is wiser than the evening. It's late already. Where are you planning to go for a night? You may stay here, and in the morning we'll figure out how to resolve your problem." Josh agreed to stay at that woman's house for the night. Coincidentally, she was also named Robin. Previously, she had been a milkmaid, but an encounter with an unruly bull left her injured. From then on, she managed as best she could, relying on the kindness of her neighbours. Long story short, but Josh didn't just stay for a night. Initially, Josh assisted her with minor tasks, but ultimately decided to stay and began extensive repairs. He also found the right doctors and paid for Robin's costly surgery to repair her lower spine. This was followed by 6 months of rigorous rehabilitation, during which he was a constant support. Finally, she was able to take her first step. In the meantime, Josh purchased the neighbouring house and land, merging it with Robin's property. He equipped the farm, acquired livestock, and hired workers. Essentially, he was back in business, albeit a different one. A couple of years later, they had a boisterous village wedding. Naturally, they invited Barney, Robin, their children, and even the dog. And Josh's bride was dancing with him, outperforming many of the younger, healthier guests.